Hi, and welcome to White Rose Canoe's March Gather about choosing a canoe and picking a paddle. We wanted to let you know that this video was shot before a combined live and remote audience using a mostly fixed camera and a speaker wandering around the room. That would be me. So you'll note that the audio is occasionally a bit garbled, for which we do apologize. But right now, let's just get started.
We're White Rose Canoe, as you can tell, and we think the Northeast only canoe only shop, because that's all we do is canoes. We dropped kayaks back in about a year and a half ago, and decided that this is what we love, so this is what we're going to do. Michael, who is not in view of the camera at the moment, he's the engineer in the background, is the owner. I'm the staff, and it's just kind of the two of us. So you can talk to one of us or the other, it doesn't make any difference at all. So the question is kind of what kind of makes a good canoe? The way we worked it out is a good canoe lets you do three things. Okay. And it's pretty simple. It lets you go out in canoe, right? Which means you can transport it, you can get it from wherever you store it to wherever you want to paddle it without breaking your back or having it fall off your car and those kinds of things. But the canoe is such that you can actually manage it and take it with you. Okay. So you can go out, you come back, which is always a good part of the equation. And in terms of when you're buying a canoe, what that means is the canoe fits what you're trying to do with it. If you take a canoe that is, lightweight, designed for point-to-point going on big lakes and slow rivers into class 4 whitewater, you might not come back. So it's fitting the canoe to what you're going to do. Okay. And the third thing is, did you smile? Okay. And if you did those three things, when you went out and came back and you smiled, then you got the right canoe. All right. And it's pretty much that simple. Okay. And whether somebody else thinks it's the right canoe is immaterial. I've yet to see 5 judges on the banks of the river holding up scorecard based on my style and my canoe, how pretty my canoe is. Just 5 geese, yes. Judges, no. So it really is, what does the canoe do for you? Okay. How does it fit your needs? And if it does that, you don't care what anybody else thinks. One of the key things to getting there is is what we really like to hear when we're talking to people at canoe is to understand what I call a paddling profile. Where are you going to paddle the canoe? What kind of water are you going to paddle in it? Are you just kind of poking around, enjoying being on the water? Are you talking 3-5 day camping trips with family? What's the purpose? What is your intended use? And when I was looking at my first canoe, there was a slight difference between the way I really intended to use it and the movie I was running in my head. Because the movie I was running in my head involved, massive whitewater and slick moves and those kind of things. Then I remembered that kayak whitewater books are primarily dedicated to dead young people. And I said, probably not going to try that right. Okay. So it's having a somewhat of an understanding where you're going, because that will let you match the boat to that. Did you come back right? Take a boat that's going to bring you home. Okay. And kind of the last thought is it's really all about trade-offs. Okay. There is not that I'm aware of a single canoe that will equally perform well as a Olympic sprint flat water canoe and a class 4 whitewater. You got it. You've got to trade in between. Okay. And so understand, and even things like what kind of gunnels do you get? Well, you get aluminum gunnels, they're great, they don't require any maintenance, but they're a little cold. You get wood gunnels, they're aluminum, they're quieter, but they require more maintenance. So again, you're making choices all along the way. And I think the last kind of opening thought I want to plant is, if you're running on a budget, and almost all of us are, we occasionally get some of those, that's fun. But what we say is you want to do is take your budget get yourself a good PFD, get yourself a couple of paddles, because paddles is always plural. All right, when you paddle, there's at least one more paddle around than there are paddlers. It's a good idea. Okay, and then take the rest of your money and buy a canoe. Okay, because you want a PFD that you're going to wear every day, every time you're on the water. Because otherwise, there's a danger factor you don't like to play with. And you want good solid paddles that are going to work for you. Okay, don't have to be expensive. Stuff can be ones that can work for you. And then you'll enjoy the boat a lot more. So that's kind of opening thoughts before we start talking about particular boats. Right? So for my audience, does that make sense? Okay, good. And for most of us, your first canoe is not going to be your last canoe. So, you know, you want to do a good job, but it's like sizing paddles. Sizing paddles, there are not micrometers involved in sizing a paddle. Okay, so you know, you get close and then you find you've got water under your boat. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the start of that. Now I'll start talking about canoes. And if you all have different pictures in your head, please share. Because you know, I do this, but that doesn't mean I'm the smartest guy in the room. I can rarely am the smartest guy in the room. So canoes are tuned for different conditions, right? And that's what we're going to talk about as we walk around, how canoes are tuned for different conditions. And if you think about kind of a spectrum from you know one end to another, at one end you've got you know my infamous Olympic flatwater sprint canoes, which are absolutely great for going in straight line very fast. Okay, as long as you can keep them upright, which it can be a challenge. Okay. On the other end is canoes tuned for heavy duty whitewater. In between, there's a lot of room. And if you look at what manufacturers talk about, they'll talk about cruisers, performance touring canoes, general touring canoes, those kinds of things. Those are canoes that are tuned for the side of the spectrum that ends at Olympic sprint canoes, but has a whole range of boats that are primarily designed for flat water, slow rivers, those kinds of things. That's where they excel. Okay. At the other end, you're going to have canoes that are better as the water gets more turbulent and quicker. Okay. And you'll hear those referred to as downriver canoes and whitewater canoes, specialized whitewater canoes, those kinds of things. And the reason they are tuned different, again, the way I like to explain it, is that when you're on flatwater slow rivers, the biggest thing you're contending with in terms of an obstacle to getting where you're going is wind. Okay. If the wind's strong enough, you've got some long waves coming at you, but they're generally not turbulent. They're running in sets and they're running along. Okay. So for those conditions, you're looking for a canoe that's tuned for that. They tend to be canoes that are longer, straighter keel, and shallow. Okay. And we've got a set of them over here. I'm going to hold your breath, guys. We're spinning. Isn't that clever? Anyway, okay. So what we're looking at now, let's see if I can get this to point pretty well. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. These are what Nona considers the Adirondacks a performance touring canoe. Okay. So that's a point A to point B, moving, designed to be very efficient going through the water. Okay. The Novacraft, the yellow Kevlar canoe at the bottom is a Novacraft pack. That's kind of their version of a cruise canoe. Okay. Rayoon, which is a Quebec manufacturer, this is a Muskoka 16. They have one that's even more tuned than this, but this is what we have in the shop. It's in that category, flatwater performance. And up above is a Novacraft Cronje, which is a 17-foot cruiser. Okay, that's what these four are. What they all have in common is they're relatively shallow in terms of depth, averaging a little 13, maybe a little less than that, depending on the individual boat, which end you're talking about. They all have a very straight keel line. Okay. And you'll also notice that when you look particularly at the Winona, and Michael, can the folks online see the both sides of the Winona? Yeah. Okay, great. And you'll notice that at both the Muskoka and the Adirondack are deeper in the bow than they are in the stern. Okay, and they're doing that because if they're cutting in the waves, they want a little more depth there, but they want to reduce that windage, so they drop it in the stern. They reduce the sail area on the boat. Okay. They're also, these boats tend to be slimmer, so they're not going to be as wide as a prospector or a general purpose boat. Okay. So that's kind of what lake boats, performance to a cruising kind of boats. The Winona, and this is something also that we'll talk about when you're looking at canoe, you want to be aware of. When Winona says things like minimal rocker, okay, rocker being how much does the bow, bottom of the bow, not the top, that doesn't make it bottom, how much does it sweep up, and how much does the stern sweep up from the lowest point here. A boat with no rocker is straight from here, all the way along. Okay, and what that does is improve the ability of the boat to go straight when the wind is pushing at it from the side. Okay, so that's tracking for folks who aren't familiar with the term. Okay, when Novacraft says minimal rocker, they're talking about an inch. Okay. So they're both using minimal, but you need to look at the boat to see what that manufacturer means by that word when they say something like minimal rocker, because it varies. Okay. So those are boats that are really designed, like I said, for that lakeside. I'm going to spin the camera again. These are prospectors. Prospectors are kind of the classic downriver. Virtually every manufacturer makes a prospector in different lengths and those kind of things. But again, they're different between manufacturers. Everybody interprets it a little bit different. What you can see with these is they tend to be deeper, okay, because you're in turbulent water. So you want more depth to keep you drier. It also gives you a more safety factor if you're getting caught on something and you need to roll the boat so the water doesn't fill the boat. It gives you a little bit more depth, so you've got more time to recover. Okay. And again, if I'm saying anything that people don't agree with, don't be shocked. Let me know. Okay. They tend to have rocker. You can see, again, it's easy to see the bow sweeping up, but what you need to be looking for is how the bottom of the boat moves up. The Novacraft prospector has about 2.5 inches of difference between when the center of the boat's on the floor and when the bow of the boat, how far the bow is. Okay. I keep trying to get out of the spotlight. He keeps putting me in. Anyway, okay. The Winona also has about 2.5 inches. And this is where you see a difference. The Rayum 16 prospector actually has very little rocker. It's only got about 1 inch, a little less than 1 inch. Their 15 has 2.5. So again, you've got to look at the specs to understand what's going on. Okay.
So they turn easier.
The 15, the one with more rocker, turns easier. That's the trick. And it's also easier. One of the things you do canoeing, and people may know this already, is, for example, when I solo my pal, I'm always offset, sometimes called Canadian but my knees are in in the side of the boat over here. The boat is up on edge. Okay. And when you do that, one of the side effects of that is it shortens the water length, which makes it turn easier. So if you've got a loaded boat that's flat and you need to turn it, rocker helps because it lets you have less water line in the water. Okay. And if you can even tip that up, that'll clear even more. Okay. So more rocker, it's deeper, it tends to be wider as well. You have some more buoyancy and more carrying capacity. Okay. And again, because what you're dealing with in the downriver scenario, the challenge is avoiding running into things. Okay. And getting through the turbulence that you're experiencing in the water. As opposed to lakes where, again, it's wind being pushed around, and it's when you are dealing with water going up and down, it tends to be rhythmic as opposed to turning through. Yes, sir.
Generally, what are you talking about? The average difference in width?
Inch, 2 inches, depends on the manufacturer of the boat. Again, it's really very specific to the individual boat. And that's why, you know, it's good to spend some time looking at those specs. The specs don't tell you everything about the boat. And one of the things that we do is we maintain a fairly good, I think we've got 15 boats in it now, sample fleet of boats that we have out back that are there specifically. So when you get down to, I'm thinking between these two boats, we'll have those two boats or boats that are very similar to them that we can actually put you on the water on so you can get a feel for it. Because that's the ultimate test. We really like people to paddle before they buy, if we can. So that's kind of on this. And I talked about trade-off before. So what's the trade-off here? Shorter, wider, more rocker, good maneuverability, not as efficient if you're going on a smooth lake from point A to point B. You're going to spend more time or energy to get the same distance than you would in a performance touring boat. Okay. Performance touring boat will get you across that lake straight, but you get into some turbulent water, particularly if you look at the, how shallow the stern of this is. A following wave coming in over your stern is more likely to get water in your boat than it would be in something like a Reunion or a Prospect or one of these boats. So that's kind of the trade-off we're working with, talking about. Okay, that all makes sense. Okay, Michael, you getting any comments on the chat yet? Okay, all right. How's that? Okay. This set that you're looking at now is okay. Thank you. Actually, somebody who actually has a memory and learns, which is not me. Yeah, is that good, Michael? Yep. Okay, great. White beard. It's all my brain cells leaking out as they're calling it my beard. Anyway, these are what Winona calls general purpose or general touring. Rayanne calls a family boat, Novacraft calls a recreation. But they're all in the middle of the spectrum. Okay? Between these two. Okay. So what they'll have is where a prospector might have 2.5 inches of rocker, one of these would have 1.5 inches. Okay. They'll be where a prospector might be 14.5 to 15 inches deep. This will be 13.5 to 14. So they're going to be, they're in between. And so what they do pretty effectively is cover like the 70% in the middle of the spectrum. And if you're doing a lot of different things, but you're not getting to the extremes in any one of them, these are kind of where we would start talking to you if you came in the shop. Okay. They're good family boats, they're good camping boats, family camping boats. The difference is, these are good for camping, and you can take them on different distances. But if that's what you do all the time, then you want to be over here in one of the performance touring or one of these boats, the initial, the Adirondack or the Muskoka or something like that. If that's if you're 90% of your paddling, 80% of your paddling is you're out there for 5 to 10 days camping with your family in the boundary waters, and you're really traveling, 10, 15 miles a day or more, we're going to tune you over here a bit. Okay. This is, I'm still doing camp and I may go out for a week or so, or it's not 100, a lot more high percentage, it's, maybe 25, 30, 40%, something like that. But you also wanted to do camp, you want the kids to go out and feel very stable in the boat, those kinds of things, then we're kind of in this category. All right. So, and what we've got here, by the way, is, let's see, this should be the Aurora from Monona, the Explorer 16 from Rayu, and this is a Muskoka. Now, one thing you'll also, it's going to be hard for you folks on the camera to see, but the Muskoka is actually a keel boat. Okay, so if I pick it up, so maybe the camera folks can see it. There is actually, in this case, what's known as a T keel. T keel simply means it's narrow, a little bit deeper. Okay, that helps the tracking of the boat. Okay, that helps handle that wind. So the upside is when you're in a crosswind, the boat's going to stay on line longer, more easily. It's a trade-off. When you're trying to turn the boat, the keel makes it harder. Okay, and there are ways to manage that, but it just what do you more often face your problem. There are a lot of good ways to manage your boat so you're going straight even in the wind without having a keel, but in the right situation, it's a good choice. You probably wouldn't like one if you were spending time on rivers where you have to pull over beaver dams a lot, for example, because the keel will get hung up. But that's another option. Novacraft puts keels on a number of their boats. Optional. Okay. So we've talked about touring, performance touring kind of canoes. We've talked about downriver, and we've talked about general purpose in between. All right. And we're about halfway through. That's good. That's good. So again, this is where, when we're talking about these, talking and us listening to you tell us how you're going to paddle, and you, when you're in talking to somebody about a canoe, being able to express, this is what I kind of want to do with the boat. Okay, and now you've got a little knowledge, you might be able to use a few of the terms and those kind of things to get there. Is really good because that'll help them point you to boats that are most likely want to do what you want. Okay, but again, you never know. Customers will surprise you because you will think that this is the perfect boat for them, but you let them take out another one that, and that's what they love. And again, bottom line, that's what counts. It's not that you paddle a boat that I think is good for you. It's that you get a boat that you fell in love with. Okay, that's why I've got a pal. It's just, I got in the boat and the boat said, okay, we're going to have fun. So, all right, let's do it. And kind of away we went. All right. So some of the things we touched on, but I'm going to go kind of through them quickly. Hull shape. What you're looking at as indicators are how long is the boat, what's the width, what's the depth of the boat, how much rocker it has on it. The last thing you want to talk about, we haven't talked about yet, is how much arch is there to the hull. Now, when we say arch to the hull, okay, and oh, by the way, if you get in a boat and fall in love with it, you forget all this other stuff I've been telling you for the last half hour. Okay, because again, falling in love is what counts, as long as the boat gets you home. The arch is how does the hull go up side to side? Okay, you can have a very flat bottom boat to a boat, and those of you here, I'll try and get the camera when we're done. I want you to take a look at the Rayoon Prospector 15, which has got a whole lot of arch, and the Fox is the same way around. So the more rounded the bottom is, the more arch you have in the bottom, the more efficient it is going through the water. Trade-off. The more twitchy it's going to feel when you're sitting in it straight up and down unloaded. Okay, it's going to twitch on you more. In fact, the Fox is a solo up there. We'll show you folks on the camera in a minute. Is a really great solo boat that has a very arched bottom. Okay, and we're comfortable with the boat ourselves. We're comfortable selling it to people, but we decided that we've got one in the demo fleet, and we're not going to sell it to anybody who hasn't traveled with it. Just because it's got a fair amount of twitch, it is rock solid, secondary or loaded. And by that, what I mean is when the boat's loaded, more of the hull is in the water. Okay, and the more hull it is in the water on the arch, the more it's spread out, the more stable the boat is. Okay. Or what happens with it as you roll it on its side, you're getting more hull in the water again. And having more hull in the water means, again, makes it stable. All right. So on its side, that boat will just go all day long. But if you're new to canoeing, you want to be aware of how twitchy it is, and just understand that if it's not too extreme, people get used to it very quickly. Okay, but there are some boats that have a little bit more than that. All right, so that's what arch is about, and what those things affect, you know, the length, width, depth, rocker, arch, and those kind of things, is performance through the water. Wider boats with flatter hulls are slower than narrower boats with arched hulls. Okay, stability, responsiveness, how quickly it responds to what you're doing, how well it travels. The hull material, talk about that on that brief. I want to get the paddles in about 5 minutes. The hull material ranges from everything from wooden canvas, which we have absolutely gorgeous back there, aluminum, fiberglass. So wooden canvas and aluminum are kind of separate categories. Grumman you can still buy Grumman. You really can cook your eggs on it as well as paddle. And then you get into what we call generically referred to as composites. That's anything that's cloth and resin put together. And so it's fiberglass, it's Kevlar, and then you start getting into some exotic stuff. Novacraft makes a material called Tough Stuff, which that's what this is. What I'm pointing to, I'm going to turn the camera so you can see it, is the black Prospector there, the black weave Prospector. This is actually the Tough Stuff material with clear coat on it rather than colored stuff. This is what the fabric looks like. And that's actually basalt rock. They melt and turn into a weave, a piece of cloth. And a negra, which is a polypropylene material. The basalt gives it strength, it gives it some stiffness. The negra gives it some flex. And when you're in a canoe, one of the things you want is some flex in the hull, because when you run into things in a canoe, you're doing a 4 mile an hour impact with 60 to 80 to 200 pounds of stuff in it. So what you really want to do is have the canoe hit the flex, or push in and then release. Okay, so having some flex in the hull is not bad. All right. Enough about that. There's also the S-skip. If you can see the one on the bottom online here. This is an ABS material. This is actually a 5-layer laminate. Foam in the center, 2 layers of vinyl, 1 on each side, which adds, the foam gives you stiffness and flotation, so you don't see float tanks in here because it doesn't need it. The vinyl adds some additional structure, and then they've got a layer on the outside and on the inside that's for abrasion resistance. It's the best thing since Royal X went away, and is probably the toughest material out there in the market. If you're going to spend your life running against rocks, you want to go like that. or a tough stuff expedition. Okay. Gunnels, so that's hulls material. And the trade-offs there are weight, durability, how complex is it to repair and maintain. So an ABS boat like this, virtually no maintenance, but it's not a light boat. It's not an 80-pound wooden canvas boat, but it's 55, 60, 65 pounds, those kind of things. A lightweight carbon boat. We've got a little one. I'm going to turn to the solos now because I want to mention those. So we'll turn the light again. I'll remember to turn it this time. Okay. So you can see this little camera is seeing it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, if you look at the little 10-footer, 10'6" that's sitting in the Adirondack, that's a 10'6", 20-pound boat. It's Kevlar and a lightweight layout. And that's still not as light as they got them back in the late 1800s. When they had Nessma took a 10-foot, 2-inch thing, the Saragam out, and it was like 10 pounds. Russian said he'd never build another boat like it. Anyway, so, and the trade-off there is you got to be a little more careful. And just to say it, because people get concerned, a lightweight Kevlar boat is not a fragile boat. Okay. 80% of the boats that they use in the boundary waters are lightweight Kevlar boats. Okay, and they give them out to renters who beat them to death and come back. So they're not rock boats, but they're, you're not going to break the Kevlar, but you crumple up the resin that holds it together. So don't be afraid of them. Just be aware of a couple things. Okay. Last thing, and now I am going to get the paddles, so everyone's got a little bit of time on those as well. These are solos. What you're looking at in this wall are solo boats. Get over here so you can see. They probably are grateful that they don't have to, but if you have to suffer, they have to suffer. What we've got, similar solo boats are like any other kind in terms of there are tripping boats. This is the Winona Wilderness. Again, you can see it looks very much like the Adirondack set up as a solo. So it's a really good, fast tripping boat. This is a 12-foot Nova Craft trapper. This is modeled after a chestnut canoe trapper built back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, for guys in the Adirondacks who were trapping and hunting and fishing, walking between the small lakes and doing portage. So this is a 12-foot solo. It's a great little solo. It tracks very well at least I find that it does. And if you go out and get your elk, you can bring it home. And there's a picture of a guy from Saskatchewan paddling a trapper with his elk. So that's a good one. The infamous Fox is on top. Very good cruising solo. There's a guy over in Germany who did a review with Kevin Callan, who is a guy from Canada who does a lot of reviews and those kind of things. And casually commented that, yeah, it felt pretty good. You could probably take it out in class 2 quite well. Okay. This is the one that's got a lot of arch on the bottom. And if I'm pointing to the one up here, folks on camera. So this is the one that is really kind of twitchy when you first sit in it, but if you get used to it, you get comfortable with it, it's a really nice cruising solo. Okay. So again, same kind of trade-off, just in a solo model. All right. Okay, I want to switch to paddles now for just a little bit, if that's okay. All right, everybody. Michael, anything going on in the chat? Okay. I'm going to turn this, put this back up. And so many moving parts. Okay, there we go. All right. Over there. So paddles, we thought canoes had a lot of variety. We could get into this side. We were hoping to have a paddle stand, because one thing about paddles, if you lean them up against something, they are, I think it's one of the things they designed to fall to the ground with a flat. Okay, we all have that happen. So, all right. Can they see the blades in the camera?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, we're pretty good. Okay. Obviously, a wide variety of paddles, and believe me, this isn't all the styles that there are. I just got another book on making canoe paddles, and they show all of the a wide variety of the indigenous paddles and stuff, and they're really amazing. So let me get started with these. Just look to make sure I'm going to organize this. Okay. So with paddles, the same kind of thing, how you're going to paddle can steer a lot of what kind of paddle, just like a canoe. So just like your paddling profile applies to canoe, it applies to paddles. The paddle you want, if you're a point-to-point paddler, again, marathon guy, your paddling experience is I want to get as far as I can, as quickly as I can, those kind of things, then you're probably going to want something with a bent shaft like this, okay? Which is totally different from somebody like me who isn't in a hurry to get anywhere. And I really enjoy the experience of moving the paddle through the water, okay? So I tend to gravitate to something like a beaver tail, okay? Or a longer one. So again, that's how it can really change your paddle based on what you're trying to do. And so let me just review this quickly, make sure I got myself. Okay. And it also matters what kind of water. Obviously, if you're paddling in the Ipswich in late summer or stuff, this is not the paddle for you, because the Ipswich is about 8 inches deep at that point, and if you're only getting that much blade in the water, you know, it's not going to work for you. Okay. So it's all that, how you paddle and where you paddle really. Okay, so let's start at the bottom and work up. You look at the blade of a paddle for what you're doing with the paddle. Okay, the blade is really affected by the purpose of it. Okay, again, a shorter, wider blade. This, kind of an extreme example would be this. This is a 7.5 inch wide blade. They actually make it, Crayon makes an 8.5 inch version of this. Okay, this is a whitewater paddle. Okay, and again, take with a grain of salt. Anybody on the call who does more whitewater than I do, which means if you do any whitewater, you're doing more than I do. Feel free to contradict. But essentially, what a blade like this does, especially because it's spooned, I hope you can see that. Okay, is when you put the water, when you start putting the paddle in the water, you're going to get an immediate hard grip on the water, and you're going to pull a lot of water. So the column of water that you're interacting, which is going to be in this space around the paddle, is going to be very resistant to being pushed back, which means you're going to react very quickly. Okay, your boat's going to react. So in whitewater, where you're looking for those quick reactions, you're going to want a wide, squared blade that lets you grab a lot of water. Okay, trade-off. The scoop is helpful, but they're also flat blade. I just happen to grab the scoop ones because it's the most dramatic example. We'll also talk about grips later, but given that I'm running long, which I always do, by the way, you'll see T grips on of some form or another. Okay, you can see, hopefully you can see that on there, and that's because it gives you an extraordinarily secure grip on the block paddle. So you're not going to want to lose it. You're going to want to really be able to apply that power. Okay. I wouldn't find this comfortable for a long cruise. Those kind of things. You can't target it, shift your hand, do all those kind of things. Again, trade-offs. The other thing is with blades that are going to do a hard grip, pull a lot of water, that stress of doing that has got to end up someplace. Okay, it's going to end up with you. Okay, so just be aware it's going to, you wouldn't, do a 20-mile day necessarily, on a slow lake with a paddle like this. You can, and for some people that's great, but I'm an old guy. I need to save my joints, so not what it is designed for. Okay. Kind of on the other end, let's walk that. So generically, these, and there are a variety of them. This is a bending branches loom, and this is a really good basic, and it falls into the broad category of a sugar island design, which just means it's a square tip, square edge, blade close up here. Is a good working paddle, and it has what's known as a palm grip. And if you can see it on the, try and bring it closer to the camera, if you can see it or not, but it is shaped asymmetrically. Okay, so when you put your hand on it, your fingers wrap in. It's a really comfortable grip and those kind of things. All right, just very comfortable. Takes a little bit of strain off your hands and your wrists to do that. Okay, so that's good. And these paddles, and I'll talk about them, things now. Also, if you're looking for a paddle, particularly if you're in a paddle that has, you're paddling in shallow water and those kind of things, having some kind of a guard on the tip. Bending branches uses resin, so when you bang it into the rocks and the bottom and stuff, it's protecting it. Surprisingly, even these single piece wood paddles, if you look really closely, they've put in a little bit. It's not as visible, but there is a hardening down here as well. Okay, but one thing to look for is, does your paddle have one? Okay, so Sugar Islands, good general purpose paddle. Great for camps, great for any use. I mean, they're just, good, solid paddles, and you can get them. This is a variation. This is what one calls their Explorer Plus. You can see it pulls in towards the top more, a little bit wider on the bottom. It carries that rock guard, they call rock guard, further up the blade, because now they're thinking, okay, now we're doing some wilderness stuff. We're out on some twisty rivers and those kind of things. We're more in some stuff like that. These are laminated paddles. Bending branches paddle, they're almost all. I'm not aware of one that's not a laminated blade. So one of the things you look for is they make it pretty. They spend some time picking the wood. Okay. So those are kind of Sugar Island examples. Next kind of broad category is what's called beaver tails. Okay. And for an obvious reason, blade looks like a beaver tail. Okay. Beaver tails are widest at the bottom. Okay. Again, this is a gray owl. It still has the rock guard. It's a laminated blade. It has a symmetric grip. Okay. And again, if you folks can see that. And so you don't get that same kind of wrap on it. Okay. But it's a bit better if you are using strokes where you're rotating the blade. If you're shifting your grip a lot, then having that, or if you're doing a grip where you're doing a J stroke a lot, and if you keep your hand closed, you're torquing that wrist. So you'll learn to kind of open your hand a bit, relax your hand, slide it down a bit. And in that case, this kind of grip works a little bit better. So again, depends on how you paddle and what you've got. Okay. The idea behind a beaver tail, it is longer and narrower. When the bending branches beaver tail, all bending branches blades are generally 19.5 to 20 inches long, except for the beaver tail, which is 25 inches. But it's narrower, so it's got same kind of square inches in it, but it's a narrow blade. This is even just a pitch narrower. The narrower blades, what that does in terms of your paddling is you get a softer catch, because you're not pulling as much water immediately. Now with the beaver tail, you're still pulling, you get to the max water point pretty quickly. Okay, and then you're going to follow through. But you get a little bit softer catch, which is a little slow, a little less stressful on your body. Okay. When you move up to an otter tail, and not all otter tails are this long, we kind of pulled out the extreme example. An otter tail is the widest point is not at the tip, somewhere up in the body of the blade. Okay, in this case, here. And again, what that gives you is that soft catch you put into the water. As you stroke through, you're getting more and more, adding more power as you bring the blade through. The blade, because it's thinner, has some flex in it. So it's going to flex. When you get to the point where you're about to release, stop pulling, that flex comes back to you. The blade straightens out, so you get a little kick there. You have to be really sensitive. And then you're out and going. So what you get with this is more of a, if you're cruising the big lake and you're traveling, you don't have to be going fast, but you can. As you're traveling along, you're going to accumulate less stress over the course of the day because of the softer catch, the more gradual power blade. Now, the people say, well, it's not as powerful. It doesn't provide the same kind of quick thrust that you need. All of a sudden that rock's 2 inches in front of you, you got to move bow over a foot. This isn't going to do that. By the time you get the paddle all the way in the water, you hit the rock. Okay. But like a car engine, and there's something to do this, once you get a car up to speed, there are some cars that actually stop firing on half their cylinder because they don't need that to keep going. Once you've established your speed, you're not needing as much energy to keep going. So with an otter tail like this, it's going to take you a bit longer to get up to cruising speed, a few more strokes to get there. But once you're there, you're going to stay there, you'll move along, and again, you're accumulating less stress. Okay. So it's a matter of, what works for you. Okay. And the other thing that I want to just point out, and then I'll look at my notes and see if I skipped anything. Like with the beaver tail, like we did a compare paddle with the two of them. I'm going to put a video up on YouTube. The blades are almost identical, but another thing that happens, bending branches puts a bigger shaft than gray outlets. So it feels different. You're holding, and the grip is beefier than the gray outlet. So at some point, it comes down to which one feels better. Okay, and that's something you want to pay attention to because the paddle is the thing you interact with most when you're moving around. A couple other things I want to mention on paddles because they're important. I keep picking up the cards over there, and once I want her in my back pocket. Okay. Sizing a paddle. You talk about that. Used to be when I was a Boy Scout in the last century. Just barely in the second half of the last century. Anyway, the sizing of a paddle was, well, you stand there and put it up here. Okay, well, pretty clearly, you can see, if you look like this, shaft length, well, I'm sorry, put on the floor. These would be for two different people, okay? But you hold the shaft, you don't hold the whatever. When you turn them over, they're virtually identical in shaft length. Okay, so when you're sizing a paddle, you size for the length of the shaft. Okay, and what you want is a shaft that is long enough to get it so when you're paddling, your top hand is kind of here. Your bottom hand will generally, for most paddlers, runs kind of along the gunnel. Okay. And there's enough wood below that to get the blade all the way to the water. Okay. Now there's variations. If you're a stern paddler all the time, then you probably want to go a little long because you're also doing a lot of the basic, going forward minor correction strokes, and having that little bit of extra length gives you a little bit more leverage. Now, you don't want to go crazy because you don't want to end up paddling. You can invest your shoulder. Okay. If you're a bow paddler, you don't need that extra. Most of your control strokes are kind of draws and those kind of things, and you might want a little more square inch on your blade because you're getting engaged when you're trying to pull the boat sideways to get around something or steer from the bow. Okay, so there's variations based on that. So again, that's a good piece of information to transmit to whoever you're talking to. Okay. And I'm right at 8 o'clock. Okay. The thing I wanted to say also about sizing, again, this goes back to one of the very first comments, particularly in sizing a paddle, there's no micrometers involved. Okay. I mean, one of the companies that puts out guidance says, yeah, what you do is you sit on a square bottom chair, you put the paddle between your legs, which is what we do here, and you measure to, if it's a bent shaft, you kind of go to the tip of your nose because you want about a 2-inch shorter paddle with the bent shaft, or you put it up to your eyebrows or kind of middle of your forehead. By the way, that's plus or minus 2 inches of the paddle that will fit you. So it's a 4-inch, you got a 4-inch margin of error over there. So like I said, no micrometers. And if you've got a paddle that you like the feel of in terms of how it paddles and stuff, measure the shaft and bring the paddle in. Okay.
People of shafts, so they say that's a 30-inch shaft.
If they don't, the person you're talking to will or bring a tape. For example, I know on
But they make all of those in every 2-inch lengths or something.
yeah, they depends depending on the paddles. Generally, it's about a 2-inch or a 3-inch. So go ahead. They don't produce paddles in 1/2-inch increments. There's generally a 53 and a 55 and a 57, or it might be a 51, 54, 50. All right. I think that's everything I wanted to cover, and it's at 8 o'clock, which worked out nicely. So, any more questions, or Michael on the chat? Any questions there?
Because one question, if you could, I already kind of answered, but it's not either. Mostly soloing,
Yep.
occasionally somebody else.
Yep.
They get a solo and have the other person sit there.
Okay.
Or
Good question.
small.
Yeah, good question. In fact, I think you may have planned. So in that situation, and if you didn't hear Michael, I mostly solo, but I occasionally can. Think a kid, think the wife, whatever. That's kind of my scenario. Depending on what else you're doing, are you taking long trips as a solo paddler? When you take your wife on, you're taking the kid, the dog, and you're going out for weekends camping. What's the purpose? But generally, what you're looking for is a 15 to 16 foot tandem that you feel comfortable also solo. And the first step to doing that is when you first start doing that kind of thing, what you end up doing is you sit on the bow seat facing the stern. Okay. The reason you do that is that puts you closer to the center of the boat, which helps you trim the boat so it's sitting level in the water. Now, generally, when you're paddling, we didn't talk about trim, that kind of gets past the hour thing. But trim is how does the boat sit in the water when it's loaded with it or whatever it's loaded. And trim affects how the boat handles. Okay, and there are conditions where you want the boat to be bow heavy. There's conditions where you want it to be stern heavy. There are conditions where you want it to level paddle out, those kind of things. By sitting on the bow seat facing the stern as a solo in a tandem canoe, what it does is it puts you closer to the center of the boat. So it keeps the boat down. If you sit on the stern seat of a 16-foot tandem and you're sitting on the stern seat, your bow is going to be probably 2 feet out of the water. It's just, you know, it's great if you're doing that in a high motor boat where you're planing or something, but not so much in a so that's the first thing. But if you get that, a couple of boats that work really well, the Motorcraft Bob Special, you've got a rack of 15-foot boats over here. And I can walk the camera over there, but the Motorcraft Bob Special is an example of a great boat for exactly that purpose. It's 15 feet long, which makes it big enough to take an adult and go for kind of a weekend if you pack like a hiker kind of a thing. And it's long enough so the bow person is comfortable soloing it. That's one thing you have to watch for in boat length is if you're paddling a tandem and you want the bow paddle to get in to make sure they got enough foot room. Okay. But it paddles great as a solo. Novakraft set the bow seat a little further closer to the center, anticipating that it would be paddled as a solo. So it really puts you in a nice position. So it's great for that. I personally paddle a 16-foot PAL solo all the time. And what I did, there's a thing called a kneeling thwart. A thwart is the piece of wood that crosses between one side of the boat and the other. A kneeling thwart is one of those, but they dropped it down about some distance so that you can kneel sitting your butt on it. And that's even closer to the center so that I can sit on that, and if the wind's not up, I don't need to put any ballast in the bow. If you're doing that and you find the bow is riding high, the easiest thing is just to throw some ballast up there. And the easiest ballast I found after reading the article by the guy who wrote it, I didn't think of this, I wish I had, is I had 2 dry bags. So what you do is you take 2 dry bags, one slightly smaller than the other. You go to your launch point, fill the smaller bag with water. I have a 20-liter, that's 40+ pounds of water. Put it in the small bag, roll it up, put the small bag in the big bag, because dry bags keep water out. They're not quite so good at keeping water in. And you don't want all the dribbles in the floor of the boat. So you put it in the bigger one, close that down. Now you've got 40-some-odd pounds of ballast that you can just drop in the bow or wherever you need it to be. You get to the takeout, pull it out, empty it. You only ever carry 2 empty dry bags. You're not carrying a jug of water or whatever if you have to carry the boat out. So that's easy. So that's kind of what you tend to do. The challenge with putting them in a solo canoe and having them sit on the bottom is solo canoes tend to be a little narrower, so it's not necessarily a comfortable place for them to be. And depending on how long the solo is, it gets cramped. The other issue is if you want them to paddle, sitting on the bottom of a canoe makes it hard to paddle unless you've got a double paddle that's reaching well out to the side. I hope that answers the question. Yes, sir.
What about a canoe for a bigger guy? Are there concerns about super funnels or again small tandem?
Solo, well, a trapper, a 12-foot trapper, for example, if it can carry an adult human male and most of an elk, it's going to carry, it's 400+ pounds, I think, 480 pound capacity in a trapper. So it really depends on the capacity of the boat. Again, are we talking solo again?
Could be, also considering it a small tandem.
Small tandem, yeah. So canoes carry weight pretty well. I mean, a large male should not be necessarily in the 10-foot 6-foot lassie. So there are examples of places where, yeah, you can overwhelm the boat. I think you'd be fine. An Adirondack might be pushing it. The trapper, not not really an issue. The Bob special would be fine. You know, anything, once you get into the longer tandems, it'll be fine. 15-foot tandem. Fisherman, yeah. Fisherman, that's a Winona boat. It's a 14-foot boat that's 39 inches wide or 37 inches wide. So you've got a lot of flotation, a lot of stability. Rayum makes an Explorer 14, which is a 14-foot version of this boat that's, I think, 38 inches wide. So again, a lot of capacity in there. So they, pardon? Prospector 15, yeah. So there are a lot of good choices out there. Tom Baird, who is a guy, he's a paddler up in Canada. I met him once at a Maine Canoe Symposium. He wouldn't know me from anybody, even if I walked up and hit his place. And I wouldn't do that because he's about 6'5" and probably runs 220, 225, 230, 240. He's a big guy. And he paddles Prospector 15 solo. So, yes. Please.
What are the lengths and weights of these classes of boats?
The class ranges all over the place.
I mean, like, that's a class.
Yeah, these representative boats, the bottom three are, and we're talking about the performance touring boats for the folks on the camera. Let me spin the chair. Okay, so the bottom three are 16, the top one is 7. The one up here above you here is another one. This is a Minnesota 2. It's 17.2 or I don't think it's 18.6.
What do they weigh?
Depending on the material, the 16-foot PAL, which is in a Kevlar light, is 42 pounds. The Adirondack, which is in heavier weight Kevlar, is 49. This is a carbon and Negra boat, so it's pretty lightweight. This is 36 to 38 pounds. The Novacraft Project 17 runs 55. You know, interesting. Novacraft charges by the length, so a 16-foot Prospector and a 16-foot PAL are the same in the same material, the same price. It's 16-foot. This Prospector 16 we're looking at over here is in the Fairway Flex Core. That's running about 52 pounds. Heavier boats would run from, turn the camera again, so you can look at the audience. Well, look over here, not looking at the audience. And we have a no recorded thing. I think I got you a little bit.
I'm fine.
Okay. I mean, they'll range up to 80 pounds depending. If you get a Novacraft SP3 Prospector 17, you're 85 plus pounds.
So 35 the minimum, 85 the max.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in terms of what you could reasonably expect to carry.
That's my question is probably people finding the ball on that. What's the feasible weight that a single person would expect to put on top of the car?
Put on top of a car, unassisted. That again, it depends on the person, and a lot of it actually depends on the relative height of the person in the car. I drive a Volkswagen Golf All-Track station wagon, and specifically bought because it's only this tall. I put Canoes, so it's an easy thing.
And your PAL weighs how much again?
Mine weighs more like 54 pounds.
Okay, so
Yeah. I'm going to do a video on how to pick up a canoe, and getting it up on your shoulders can be surprisingly easy for heavier boats if you just use the techniques. In terms of getting it up on your car, if you're talking about picking it up yourself and without any assist putting it up, again, it really depends on the person and those kind of things. People with car top 80-pound wooden canvas boats. I mean, really.
I would say at the 60-pound mark,
Yeah, you're starting to get in trouble.
that it starts getting good, like January.
Yeah.
If you're strong.
Yeah.
Over 60. it got you good at it.
I would disagree with that.
And then obviously, the lower it goes, the easier it gets.
Yeah. If I don't know if Michael was hearable by all the folks here, but what Michael was saying was over 60 pounds gets to be a challenge for most people. And particularly if you've got like, a Mercedes G-Wagon or something that's, or caravan that's 4 feet over your head. There are load assist devices. Some of them are pretty simple. I have one on my car I have round bars on my car, and it's just a smaller diameter round bar that slides inside the bigger one. So if I was putting an 8-pound dory up on that thing, you just put the boat beside your car, pull out the bar, put the bow of the boat up on the bar, you're lifting 40 pounds, go to the stern, pick up the stern, miles on the bar, picking up 40 pounds, roll it over and drop it on the top. Okay, but again, I was talking about a relatively short car. So there are some load assist devices out there, but unassisted, yeah, I would agree with Michael with 60 pounds, and that's not because he's my boss. Would be where it starts to get challenging. Anything else?
Can I put in a commercial before?
Oh, Big Canoe Symposium?
Yes.
Absolutely, please do.
If you want something for more information, the first weekend in June, which is I think the 4th and 5th of June, at Brian Bond's Symposium, which is a day and a half of sessions. Many of them are on water, ranging from how to use paddles, strokes, different types of canoes, cooking, route finding. Just don't here. You can find the website. Go to the White Rose website, and there's a link to the Canoe Symposium.
Yeah.
It's
Where's Brian?
on your Bethlehem, Maine, and there's constant available camping.
Yeah, but I'll endorse that. I've been going up there pretty much all the time. Yeah, it's been there for 36 years. It's run by volunteers. Many of them are registered Maine guides or senior registered Maine guides and those kind of qualifications. If you've got a family, it's great because they actually run a separate kids program for the time. As long as you're comfortable with your kid learning how to throw a hatchet. And that's great. We were out there when we were still at the other location, and I was taking a Northwood stroke class, and we were going by the island, and here comes literally this herd of 5, 6, 7-year-olds in little micro canoes, just charged. I thought we were going to get run over and having a ball. And they teach them on water stuff. They take them around, those kind of things. So the parents can kind of turn the kids over and go do their thing and then take good care of them. As you said, ground classes about everything from how to set up a tarp to how to cook breakfast for 20 people in a skillet that big around, and I'm not kidding.
For your family.
Or your family, yeah. Could your kid. To again the stroke classes and those kind of things. I've been asked, didn't embarrass myself with a couple of little sessions. I do an English gate session. Those kind of things. But it's absolutely a great event, and they provide paddles and boats and PFDs. So if you don't have any gear, don't worry about it. If you don't want to haul your gear, don't worry about it. They'll have it there for you, and it's just a good time. You get to talk, and everybody is just super friendly and welcoming. Ask anybody anything. Don't get intimidated by the red jackets and the big guys.
There's a whole range from novices that have just want to try out canoeing to people that are out there all the time.
Yep. Great stuff. Anything else? No. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you. Hopefully the folks online got to see everything and hear everything well.
So thank you for listening. Here's a quick list of 3 events that we're doing this spring. We've got another gather as well as a Novacraft demo day. The key thing about that is if you're looking for a Novacraft and you get your order in by the April 1st, you can pick up your boat at demo day. And finally, we were just talking in the video about the Maine Canoe Symposium, and I really, really highly recommend that, especially if you're bringing kids into canoeing and those kinds of things. So again, we want to thank you for coming. We really appreciate that you did, and we hope to see you again soon.